Welcome to Event Experience by Bizzabo, the podcast where we bring the best and brightest event experience leaders together to share stories, tips, and lessons learned from creating some of the world's biggest events. I'm Rachel Moore, your podcast host. This week, we grabbed some time with Yvonne McNair, Chief Experience Officer and founder of Captivate Marketing Group. Yvonne is a two-time Emmy-nominated event producer with an immense love of the music industry, and we discuss her journey in starting her own business, how the year of 2023 impacted events, and her hopes and predictions for the future of the industry. With over 15 years of working on events, Yvonne is a guest who brings true event experience to the podcast. Welcome to Event Experience by Bizzabo. We're back with another podcast episode, and we're talking to yet another expert in the events industry. And we are going to run through all kinds of experiences. We're going to talk about our particular experts' takes on what we've seen this year. But today I am talking to a veteran, all right? So our guest today, she has been the Chief Experience Officer and founder of Captivate Marketing Group for, I had to do the math, 15 years. And so I am so pleased to welcome Yvonne McNair to the podcast. Yvonne, thank you for joining me over microphones today.
No, thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
We talk to people of all walks in the event industry. They have all kinds of backgrounds. But 15 years, I have to ask you, that segues into our obvious next question. Can you share with our audience a bit more about you starting this business and your role there? Would just love to hear the whole lowdown.
Absolutely. So I've actually been in the events industry for over 20 years. I hate saying
Woo.
that.
It's
Yeah,
awesome.
it feels so crazy to say, but I've been in the events industry for over 20 years. I actually started working in the music industry and doing PR and quickly realized that that was not for me. You work so
Mm.
hard to get the interviews and then people don't show up or, all kinds of things happen. So, but I love the music industry and really wanted to stay connected. And so I found my path to be concerts. I became a PA and I did everything I had to do to like learn the concert business and learn how to produce concerts. And from there, I started working at different entertainment agencies and where people kept saying like, "Do you do this on the side? Do you do this on the side?" And also just feeling like when I left corporate, I was a VP, but I just felt like there
Mm.
wasn't anywhere else for me to go. And
Yeah.
so decided to take a risk. I tried twice. The first time didn't go so well because I just decided one day that I wasn't being valued and I got up out my cubicle and I just kind of left and I didn't have a solid plan. And so I had to go
Mhm.
back to corporate America. And after that, had a plan. And as people
Yeah.
started asking me if I was doing it on the side, I started building clients. And, a
Nice.
lot of my clients I was taking for little money and just to start building my portfolio and just becoming known in the industry. And so here I am, 15 years later. I guess it worked the second time. I produce all types of events and I work with, corporations, brands, artists, and nonprofit organizations.
I don't get out as much these days as I used to, but I'm just think immediately of like a Taylor Swift tour and then all these amazing productions or U2 at the Glow in Las Vegas. If I look at that versus like a 3-day trade show or
Mhm,
something like that,
mhm.
I do you find that that's a big transition from producing a full concert over to like a more traditional trade show? Is there a lot of difference there?
Yeah, there is because you know what? A large production like that, and I do large scale concerts, not Taylor Swift, but when you look at those productions, there's a lot of people in the crew that work on those productions. And then obviously there are really large audience that are, coming to see those productions. And you're moving from town to town where you're not in one venue for a long period of
Mm.
time. So there's a lot that goes into it because you have to build the set each time, that you move into a different city. So there's a lot that goes into concerts, but I love it because it's very fast paced and,
Mhm.
I find myself when I'm not like moving in a million directions, I feel bored almost like, what am I doing with my life?
Mm.
So I just love all of the components and then seeing the people respond to what's being delivered in the concert and the music space.
I think that's an amazing thing that you just shared as well about a first try at kind of having your own business. You did it such a smart way to say you've got a full-time job and on the side and you're building these clients. How difficult was that on a scale of 1 to 10?
Oh God, can I go past 10? Because it was extremely difficult because I'm working my regular job. And then, in the
Mm.
evenings, I'm taking calls and meetings and stuff like that. But, My entire life has kind of been made up like that because, I had my son very early. So when I was going to school, I was working and then going to school at night, and I got 3 degrees going to school like that. So for me, sacrifice is not something I'm scared of and not able to do. But I would work my full time job and then I would, work on events in the evenings. And it just started building actually really quickly. But what I didn't know was how to run a business. I knew how to produce events,
Right.
but I didn't know how to run a business. And I think a lot of times people know that they want to run a business, but don't know the tools to run a business. So I've become a
Yeah.
student, constantly learn new ways to keep scaling my business because, as the world changes, you have to change as well.
So Captivate, you've run that business for 15 years.
Mhm.
I know we're going to talk in a little bit about a single year this year, kind of the things we've seen this year. How has that transitioned? Events from 15 years ago to now. What's going on
Obviously,
there?
improve technology, just systems, it's so much easier. 15 years ago, we didn't have the social media the way we do. We didn't have,
Right.
all of those tools. I've always been resourceful, but now it's like so many tools that you can find out there and so many more companies and vendors that you could work with, than there were
Hmm.
15 years ago. It's easier. I don't want to say it's easy to run an events business, but it's
Right.
easier because there are so many tools for you in terms
Yeah.
of like registration or tickets, in terms of how you track surveys and things like it's just so much easier now. And then just from a marketing standpoint, I use social media a lot. I don't do much print. Where 15 years
Yeah.
ago, everything was about printing an invitation and putting it in the mail and stuff like that. And everything is digital now. It's so
Right.
rare when someone wants to print and mail something. I'm like, really? Okay. So it just makes it so much easier and
Hmm.
efficient with the
Yeah.
technology that has come about in the past 15 years.
Well, let's get into the year of 2023. All
Mhm.
right. First, I would like to let you talk a little bit about the events you've helped produce this year and execute, and then we can segue more into the entire landscape of events for this particular year. How has 2023 gone for you? Talk to us about your year.
2023 has actually been a very interesting year for me. I think people are a little scared because everyone was talking recessions. I have not seen brands spending as much money as they did in 2022. When we
Yeah.
came back, I feel like 2022, people really were getting back into doing the events and not as worried about COVID and things like that. So I felt that I had bigger budgets last. So it's been a little interesting for me this year where, last year I actually did 150 events in the year, which is actually
Whoa.
crazy to me, and I felt like I was in the event Olympics because I was just like, "This one, this one, this one," but I haven't felt that this year. I mean, I've had bigger things, but not as many things, and so I think that brands just kind of pulled back a little bit, and they were a little more conservative in their spending, for 2023.
We've had some really good interviews too on the podcast, and not just this year, but you're seeing some real innovative ideas of how to create connection when maybe you're not spending the big budget as
Mhm,
much, right?
mhm.
Have you seen some of that or even used some of that yourself where it's like, let's be creative with our use of dollars since we don't have as much as we would normally?
I mean, that's been a big thing this year is being more creative to get the same
Mhm.
impact and the same engagement with the consumer. So, yeah, a lot of that has taken place. This year, there's more of a social media component. Some are still, hybrid where we're not flying
Mm.
people in, we're recording them in advance and playing them within the award show and things like that. So, I've had to be creative after, the pandemic. I was like, I don't want to do anything virtual again, but I still had to
Right.
do some virtual stuff this year just because, budgets, we weren't spending the same amounts to bring everyone in, for a show or, things like that. Just scale down. So I'm
Yeah.
hoping that 2024 people feel more comfortable, and are spending the dollars that they used to spend. Because I mean, as we know, being in the event space, events are, an amazing way to engage with consumers on all different levels.
Yeah.
I love events. And so I'm hoping that, brands are feeling better about next year.
Well, how did you feel? Let's dive in here too. So, events this year, how did you feel like when you were taking in events yourself? What were some of the takeaways? But were there any things on any experiences or activations that really just jumped out to you saying, ooh, or or anything like that? What are some examples?
I've worked on the Grammys and the way that they have transitioned in terms of the audience, some of these award shows, they're
Yeah.
doing it very differently. And I don't know if you noticed where they used to have just like theater seating for the whole venue. And now they have like little tables in the front, cocktail tables where they have, the people that are actually going up on stage, which was basically based on COVID because they were scaling things down during
Right.
COVID, where they were just having like the important people in the room. So, saw a lot of that this year, and I think that that's going to remain. I don't think that they're gonna go back to
Mhm.
the traditional way of just having theater seating.
That's interesting too that you brought up about the COVID, where the little tables at the Grammys came forward from COVID. Did you feel like COVID was still like a big weighty presence, or has it been lessening year to year,
Yeah,
including
it's
this?
been lessening. I think it would be so hard for people to go back to like everybody's wearing
Mm,
masks and, socially distanced. Because when people were over it, I felt people were just over it and they wanted to be back
yeah,
together and they wanted to be outside. But there are some changes that you still see. So we only thought of it one way. And then when COVID hit,
yeah,
we had to think very differently and we had to be more creative. And that's the one thing I will say what the pandemic caused for me in particular is to be more creative and to think so much
mm,
more outside of the box, which I thought I was doing, but it's like, I was doing, virtual concerts where I was shooting in empty venues because it was like I wanted to give people the feel of like what they had before. So where I would have never
yeah,
thought of that before, because I don't know if you remember everybody started performing on their couch. And it was like, well, that doesn't really feel like a show.
yeah,
So it's like just
yeah.
thinking differently. And so there's so many things that I learned during that time that I'm still using because it really translated very well, which I would have never thought of that, had we
Right.
had that moment to, be forced to think differently.
That's something that we've kind of noticed as well. Some people saying where there's a little bit more forgiveness. And even as event designers like yourself are being more creative, maybe the audience got a little more creative in how they're ingesting and participating, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, for sure, because that felt so different because there's a different energy. When you're just doing an acoustic set on your couch, feels very different when you are able to have your full band, on a
Yeah.
stage. I had to do something with actually Patti LaBelle, and it was like her first time in Philadelphia being back on the stage when I produced it. And it was so good. She felt so good because she was like, it almost feels like, before. So it just gave a
Yeah.
different energy. And it translated really well for the audience where they became more engaged and excited because they could feel the energy. It's hard to do that when you're just, sitting on the couch.
Such a great point. And now you've got my brain kind of going into high gear here because we're so focused on the audience, right?
Mhm.
And rightly so. That's who we want to take in the content and
Yes.
experience. But that it matters as much to your speaker or your performer to have a feeling like I got the energy and even we're meeting that need as much as we can in with the environment we're given, but it really does matter from, couch to stage.
Absolutely. Energy is so important. And if you look at, not to keep talking about award shows, but I love them so much, is how they started putting fans up front. Because, at a
Mhm.
point, it was just like, regular industry people were like, yes, great performance. But fans, are really giving you
Mhm.
that energy and it feels so different. So it comes across different when you're watching it on TV. So I do think that there are just, ways that we can change the way we think about things and the way that we present things to our audiences that, get
Yeah.
them more engaged and more, responsive to what we're doing.
So as a lover of award shows, do you have a favorite?
I do. I'm gonna say it's the Grammys, and I would say it's the Grammys only because they focus on all types of music, not one type of music,
Mhm.
and so you're able to see who's at the top of each genre of music. And
Yeah.
so I feel where some people are like, "Well, I don't like country or I don't like this," but these are people you should know because they're at the top of their game. And so that's why I love it because I feel like it exposes, anyone who's watching to people who are outside what they would normally see. And, I've become fans of people, just by seeing them, when they're on those different shows. If you just stick to one thing where it's one type of music, you're just not exposed to it. So I do love what the Grammy delivers because, there's all types of music and it's usually the top of the top.
Let's get into prediction mode
Mhm.
a little bit. So we're in the latter half of October 2023. What do you think lies ahead for 2024? Like realistically, and then what are you hoping for? And we know budget is one of them.
Right. Yes, I'm definitely hoping for budgets. I mean, I think this was an interesting year for a lot of, I don't know if you saw a lot of festivals and concerts that were outdoor were canceled. And it had a
That's right.
lot of challenges because of weather. So this was a really interesting year weather where like in New York, it was like the rainiest season ever. I don't know where you are, but in New York, it was like they said this was the rainiest year in 100 years. And so
Wow.
literally every weekend it was raining. So there were so many things that were canceled. So I'm hoping that we
Mhm.
have better weather because I do love, outdoor concerts. I do love outdoor festivals. So I'm hoping that next year, will be better from that perspective. Because
Mhm.
I think that also it just brings such a sense of community at those types of events that are very different from indoor events. So my
Yeah.
hopes and predictions for next year is one, I'm predicting that people will, continue to spend more, next year or start spending more next year because they'll feel more comfortable
Yeah.
doing so. And I'm just hoping that, we do have more outside events because I think this was a challenge for so many
Yeah.
as a
I think Burning Man had a very unfortunate
very
situation.
unfortunate. Yeah, yeah. And it's
Right.
so hard when you work so long and then it's like weather, So I hope
That's right.
that, for next year that we'll see better weather and that, we'll see more, big artists going out on tour next year as well. This was an interesting year though, because like with Taylor, you had Beyonce, you had Drake. It kind of actually affected some of the smaller shows because
Mm.
everybody was spending bigger dollars. I don't think any of those three will be on tour next year since this was their touring season, but we'll be able to see, a lot of artists succeed as well through the season next year.
If you could produce a concert for anybody, who would you wanna produce their concert tour for?
Beyonce.
Great answer. I mean, that is the answer, is it not?
Absolutely, yes, 100%
Yeah.
Beyonce. Oh, but I would say Beyonce or Taylor, because
Ooh.
both of those
Mhm.
women broke records this year, changed
Mhm.
the economy this year, and, I just think, like, for 2 women who are very different in, their style of music and stuff like that to do what they did this year, I think is amazing, so I'd have to say either one of them would be great.
I've heard the joke, which maybe it's not a joke, this could be real, that each of those women is their own line item on the GDP. Economy infusion was ridiculous,
Absolutely,
right?
I think it's true.
We're gonna segue into some questions that are gonna let our audience know a little bit more about you.
Okay.
Can you name an item that you forgot for a work event that caused some panic?
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Last year, I produced a fashion show outside and it was raining like crazy. And literally, like all week, the weather was like beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Thursday, it was 100% rain. So I had to load in the night before because we had to tent it, everything. I mean, it was pouring. So the whole day, it was just like rain. I was fighting with the rain. I felt like, the newscaster where they're out in the rain, braving the rain and the weather. It was just crazy. So there was an awards portion during the fashion show. And we get to the awards, and I realized I left the awards in my car, parked down the street because I didn't want the boxes to get wet and everything like that. And as the person started speaking, I realized it. I got up and I ran to my car, ran. I mean, they had started speaking. I run back, I have the award, and I just go to the stage and I put my hand out with the award so they could grab the award. And so
Oh,
I
wow.
ran there, I ran back, and I was like, and I used to be a runner, and I was like, well, I still got it because I got to my car and back before they finished. But I had forgotten
Wow.
the awards. I was trying to keep them safe and I completely forgot to pull them out
Oh,
for the show. But fortunately, I could still run and I got it. And nobody knew the difference.
impressed, so impressed. Also, don't feel bad. I've interviewed at least one other person this year for this podcast
Mhm.
who has said that they forgot the award. So
Huh.
it
I was just
happens,
like,
but
"How
you
could I do that of all things?" But in my mind, I was just like, I don't want them to get messed up all day."
is there anything that you're listening to, reading, or watching right now that you cannot put down?
Okay, so I am reading a couple of books. I read a couple books at the same time, and I'm a Peloton user. And so the latest book by Alex Toussaint, which is really good because he has an incredible story of like always being kicked out of school, and now he's like the successful, Peloton instructor. So
Mhm.
I'm reading that, and I'm actually reading because I'm always trying to learn. And this year, I've actually produced a few documentaries, and so I want to get more into it. So I'm reading books on production. I've produced 3 documentaries, and they've all done really well. So I was like, well, imagine if I, really focus in on it. So I can't
Yeah.
put it down right now.
Which documentaries?
Well,
Drop
right
some
now
names here.
yeah, right now I have it aired on WeTV and as well as All Black, but Michael Bivins, who is in New Edition. It's called The Hustle of at 617 Mike Biv, and it aired August 24th, and it was #1 on all platforms, and so it's doing very well. It aired on WeTV October 5th, and so it's doing really well. So it's still streaming right now on all
Nice.
platforms, and I'm super excited about it. So I'm excited to, kind of add that to my resume. So goes back
Ec
to keep learning.
Is there a particular social post or a piece of media or maybe a hot take out there about events that you found interesting lately?
Hmm. Well, obviously, I follow Biz Bash, which I'm sure if you don't know
I
Biz Bash
do.
as an event professional, you should. But I always follow their posts and get their email newsletter because they have so many amazing tips. And they also, feature so many amazing events. So you're able to, see what other people are doing, your peers. And so that is one that I really pay a lot of attention to is Biz Bash.
Finally, where can our listeners find and follow you online?
Absolutely. That is easy. On Instagram, I do a lot on Instagram. So it's Yvonne McNair underscore CMG. CMG is the initials for my company. And then on LinkedIn, it's just Yvonne McNair. So on all other platforms, Yvonne McNair.
In our Skill Up segment, Yvonne has advice for event profs, which, by listening to this podcast, you're doing right this minute.
I'm a student of the events industry. I keep learning. I don't think I know everything. And I keep learning. I take courses all the time. People are like, you're such a nerd. I read a lot, and I talk to younger people, to see what's coming out and what people are looking forward to. So I would just say keep learning. I think that's the best way to skill up is keep learning and not thinking you know everything. Even if you're a veteran in an industry, there's always something you can learn.
Thanks again to Yvonne McNair for joining us on Event Experience, and thank you for listening. If you're enjoying the show, we'd love to hear it. Connect with us on social and subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you're listening. Also, don't forget to share the show with your colleagues and friends. You can find transcripts of each episode and key takeaways on bisabow.com/podcasts. On behalf of the team, thank you. We'll gather again soon for a new episode of Event Experience.